Uncanny Valley, or as we refer to it in photography, HDR imagery. And now, I've always had my suspicions about HDR imagery and why it's so crap, why it's so obvious. In today's episode, I'm going to discuss that a little more, and I'm going to tell you exactly why it is that when you see HDR, your brain goes, and just instantly dislikes it. So, without further ado, today's episode, Uncanny Valley. Good afternoon and welcome back to episode 28 of the Burkitt Encounter. Been doing this for almost exactly a year now, and it's become like a regular part of my therapy, if you like, and I've really enjoyed doing it. And as you know, I set off doing this just as a bit of therapy and a bit of fun, to try and give you something else other than the crap 30-second fix-it tutorial type stuff that's out there for photography. I wanted to give you a little bit more, and over the last year I've kind of come to really enjoy it, and it's become a little bit more than that for me. It's become a little bit more exciting, a bit more therapeutic, if you like, and I've really enjoyed doing it. So a couple of episodes back I upped the production values a little bit and tried to kind of maintain a better quality of video, sound, presentation, and I'll continue doing that. And within that, I'm going to try, like I said in the previous video, do a full episode every week or two with some little incidental short edits of those in between, which I've done for this last while. Although I did plan to do a podcast last week, but me and the whole family got wiped out by a terrible bug, and I mean wiped out. It wasn't nice. So I'm back here today to do an episode or two and to do a few other bits and bobs as well. And you might have noticed on the channel I've started doing a bunch of shorts. That's just to really help promote the channel and get the longer form videos out there, because you know, long form is where it's at for me. Discussing topics around photography, reality education, and doing them really quickly. Everybody's doing that. Everybody's going bam, 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 learn it. 2 seconds, bang, done. But I think real learning occurs when you spend a bit of time, effort, and energy in really consuming information or skills, developing them, practicing, reflecting on them. So my longer form videos for the full podcast episodes will continue to be anything from half an hour to an hour. Because it's my belief that that's where the real kind of stuff you need to know is. And if you've got a desire to be really good at photography and really understand the concepts, the history, the future, the now, and all those little itty-bitty things that come with it, then listen to the longer podcast, because there's much more information in there. And as you might guess, I enjoy talking. I like talking about photography. I like giving stuff back. 20-year career in photography, teaching probably for 15 of that. And I still don't feel like I've given everything back to the photography community. So that's kind of why I want to carry on talking so much and giving longer form videos, podcasts, whatever you want to call it, to prospective or even experienced photographers who might learn a bit of something, because I learn something from photographers every day. So it's good if you stick around and get embedded in the longer form videos, because frankly, that's where the good stuff is at, and that's where you'll learn the better stuff from me. And to be honest, those shorter form videos will be just for promoting the channel. Uncanny Valley. So I was watching an episode of my favourite podcast, The Y-Files, recently, and it's from a year or so back, I think, the actual episode, where AJ and the fish, Mr. Hecklefish, talk about the Uncanny Valley and how that relates to humans being able to spot when something is, particularly other human things, robots, cartoons, become too human-like, and the brain goes, no, can't compute. And as I was watching the episode, as always with the Y-Files, really in depth and, you know, very educational, if you like, I started to think to myself, this happens in photography, and although it's not really called Uncanny Valley, by the way, means Google it and find out. But it's when the brain can no longer accept that a robot or a human, a pretend human face, a doll or a cartoon, starts to look too human, and the brain starts to conflict, can't compute. And I thought to myself, that just really strikes me as a photographic thing as well, because the human eye, not even the human eye stroke brain, the process that we have to detect images can tell, even to the untrained eye, can tell when it's not real, not right. And even my wife, who was not a photographer, over years of listening to me and watching films and watching TV, can now go, oh my God, look at the green screen. Oh my God, as if a sunset's that colour. And the Uncanny Valley thing, for me, directly links to photography and photographic brain-eye coordination, because when a human eye stroke brain combination sees a landscape that's clearly what we might call over-edited to no longer look real, the human brain sees that quite easily. And around, I don't know, I guess it must probably best part of 20 years now, maybe 15 years, there's a big influx of HDR photography, high dynamic range, you know, where there was a big explosion on places like 500px and probably what they call it as well, other god-awful bloody website. What's it called? Used to have to have a Yahoo email login to get into it, where people are uploading their overly saturated, overly edited, overly fake images through a HDR process. Not so much shooting in camera HDR, but using Photoshop as a HDR process, and creating god-awful photographs, which they pass off as being edited really well. Oh, look at it. Oh, wow. But the human eye is going, what the hell? No, I'm not having that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today, about my experience of over-editing, over-saturating, and there are some culprits in photography. I'm not going to name names, you know me guys, I never name names, but there are some culprits in photography who can't help but just bloody make that shit. And you do see some kind of like less knowledgeable photographers who are coming through the ranks, if you like, going, oh wow, that's amazing, then they make all the same mistakes. But I'm yet to see, outside of probably astrophotography, nebulas and all that other stuff, pictures which I would say stay within the realms of reality that are good. And HDR, the saturation in HDR, I don't mean saturation as in the colour, the amount of it at one point was just like, and I guess it comes hand in hand with the push in AI and a push in things can't be good unless they're edited to death and all that kind of other bullshit, and it kind of like photographers got sucked into it. It's a bit like that old adage, isn't it? Just because you could doesn't mean you should. So I watched it for years, people getting but straight away my kind of brain, my and eye brain thing, my persona went, no, that looked poor. That's rubbish actually. And I was glad that I did have that, because it stopped me from putting out so much drivel. And I did some testing over time. I tested when I was used to use Instagram a lot more, and I was putting out pictures, and I used to put all their filters on. A couple of reasons: one, so they didn't have my original photograph, but two, just to see whether the ones with filters on were liked more than the actual photograph. And at the time, they weren't. I got no more likes on the HDR overdone stuff than I did on the regular pictures. So I think people in the main do understand that photographs should look natural. And natural is something that is kind of contained within our existence, our reality. And I think because those of you that know the show and have listened to me a bit know that I'm a massive proponent of a simulation theory. That's where I think we're all living in a highly sophisticated simulation. We don't know it because, you know, it feels real to us. But my research and my understanding leads me to consider that we do probably live in a simulated reality. And that reality has boundaries. So the things that we think are, I don't know, universal reality boundaries, they're only universally reality boundaries because of the constraints of the system we live in. So, for example, speed of light is a constraint of our reality, but outside of our reality, speed of light is nothing. So I think within that, we're programmed as humans to see and detect things a certain way within those reality boundaries. And I think that's why most of us anyway, can spot a fake or over-edited picture a mile off, because We've all looked at sunsets, we've all looked at people's faces, we've all looked at everyday things millions of times in our lives. So instinctively our consciousness, if you like, knows what they should look like. So when you see a really overly processed picture, your brain should, in the main, I think, kick in and go, nah, I'm not having that. So I think it is really, the recognition of why things are so poor is purely down to the fact that we live in a simulated reality that has boundaries. And when our brain, mind, eye, self, whatever it is that detects the reality, sees things that don't align with what the reality says they should, they're quite easy to notice. And sky photographs are one of the biggest for me. And I'm going to show you some really, really poor examples of some I did on purpose to test this years ago. So this is from 2015. And I did this when I first started my master's degree. Actually, I was scratching around for ideas and things to do. But I was also doing a lot of travelling at that time, travelling to Nottingham back, Manchester and back, and I was seeing lots of sunsets and things like that on my travel, so I'd pull over, get my whatever mobile phone out at the time out, take a picture, and I'd get home later, jump in the bath. While I was in the bath, I'd Instagram some stuff, and I'd just whack loads of stuff on to try and make it look, wow, amazing HDR, when really it was dog shit. And I did that for years, and so I'm just going to show you some of them and see if you can detect why they're actually poor, because they are poor. But you'll see millions of pictures like this around the place, and you'll see them, and you'll continue to see them. So you can see on this one, this is not even one of the worst examples actually. Let me just full screen this so you can see it better. Picture of a sunset. I don't even know where this was, probably over Rotherham I think, looking at it. But when you see a sunset, you will see natural colours, natural as in our reality colours. And when your brain detects anything outside of that, it tends to go, hang on. So if you look at this picture here, it might look slightly different on your screen to mine, but on mine I've got about 7 different shades of blue, which is real. That will happen on a sunset. Particularly when it's cloudy and a bit overcast like this, you'll see variations in colour of blues and reds, orange, yellow. But if you look at the blue on the right hand side in that little bit of what we might call blue sky, you never see a sky that's actually that colour blue, ever. There's far too much cyan going in that for a natural blue sky. And I think the untrained eye might not see that immediately, but if you look at it for long enough and just think to yourself, right, how many sunsets have I seen? Does the sky ever look that deep cyan? And I think you find it doesn't. And then you see it spreads across to the centre, where it becomes a little bit more greeny yellow, and then over to the left where it becomes even more greeny yellow through the over processing I did. I think most people's eye are looking at that and going, Christ Lance, what were you doing? And they'd be right, because I was purposely oversaturating it. Unfortunately, I don't have the original to show you the comparison, but trust me, the original was a lot more pasty than that. There was hardly any sky detail in it. It was quite mid-toned. It was quite wishy-washy, if you like. All that heavy cloud, all that heavy contrast, I've processed probably through Snapseed on the phone. 2015, what would that be? Galaxy S8 or something, 7, 8. And Snapseed, I've used that for probably the best part of a decade. So it's probably either Photoshop or Snapseed on the phone to really overprocess it. And I think the kind of only bit I like in this, which is relatively realistic, I think, is that little bit of rolling cloud right in the centre. You can just see the sun is behind it, just off to the right in the centre, and that, not the dark cloud, but the lighter cloud where the highlights peeking through, that's kind of all right. I mean, look how bad that is. Tell how bad camera phones are when you get up close, can you? That bit there is about, I could just about get away with that, but the rest of it is so overprocessed. And another thing you get when you overprocess is where light and darks meet, you get lines. You get like a defined line, almost like somebody's pencil lined it on. And if you look at these here, look, you can see, if you look at above this tree, look at the line around the tree. It's kind of, some of that is a natural backlight from the sun, but you would never get that amount of contrast on a normal picture or on a well-edited picture. And it's almost like, it almost looks like a painting, doesn't it, rather than a photograph, when you can see the lines everywhere. There's like false lines everywhere defining areas because of the over processing. And I think some people might say, oh Lance, that's a beautiful picture, look at the HDR on that. But for me, it's a piece of shit. And you know, all that kind of stuff, it stayed on my Instagram for a few weeks, then was deleted. And I'd like to say that I probably put it up with a caveat of them just testing, but I don't know if I did or not. My brain will say I did, but I don't know if I actually did or not. That's just one example of piss poor processing, but people love that HDR, high dynamic range, ultra fake, ultra over processed picture because they think it's brilliant and people are going to love them. Look at that genius photographer, look what he can get his camera to do. When in reality, our reality, the brain is going, what the fuck's that? And I'll show you a more recent one. This is from 2021. And this is in Liverpool, I think. Yeah, Liverpool. And again, this is me not over processing to be a prick or over processing to go, look how crap this looks. This was me saying, Christ almighty, look at this sky. This is not normal. Doesn't matter what you think about what's happening up there. That is not a normal sky. And I wanted to evidence that. And the way to evidence that is when you look up at the sky with your eye, even when it's a heavy cloud or lots of chemtrails like this, you'll see them, but you can't see what's in them and behind them. So I just wanted to illustrate that this is not normal. So you can see on this, I've boosted the contrast again, particularly the mid-tones and shadows. But again, it didn't look anything as dramatic as that in the original picture. It was more subtle. You could see it, but it was subtle. And I've over-exaggerated it here. And again, you can see, if I zoom in, you can see the lines that wouldn't be there normally, where the contrast has kind of crumbled a little bit, can you see that around the building, which is kind of there but very lightly in a regular process photo. But when you oversaturate, where you get light and dark coming together, you always get a banding like that around the building. And sometimes that banding, you can see it actually a little bit more. If you look out from the building, you can see it kind of filters out from the building, that over processing, almost like there's a halo around the building, which wouldn't be there on a normally processed photograph. And that comes down to over processing. And again, for me, the human eye looks at that and goes, come on, was it really like that? Did it really look like that? Was there that much really going on? And the truth is, no. It's another obvious, for me, Uncanny Valley picture that just goes, oh shit, it's overprocessed that. Now, some people, particularly non-trained photography eyes, might look at that and go, oh god, that sky's mad, wow, how did you do that? Well, I overprocessed it. The sky was like that, it just didn't look quite like that. I mean, I haven't painted any chemtrails in, it's just that they were there. I just wanted to over-exaggerate the amount by boosting the shadows mostly. And it's awful, isn't it? I mean, that's the kind of thing we're underneath all the time. That shit is spraying down on us all the goddamn time. And if you need any reason to doubt that the government's here to look after you, just look up. Go out and look up every day. On a sunny day, look up in the morning. See them out spraying and think to yourself as the day goes on, what was all that? Look at the state of your car. My car's currently covered in a thick grey something. People say it's just dust. Some people say, oh, when it's red, it's the Sahara. Maybe there's a bit of that. But there is no way in this world that is just steam coming out the back of an airplane engine. And there's no way that steam is dropping to earth and settling like it does. So there's something going on. So photographically, I was showing that. And from a HDR perspective, there's some photographers that love that. But from a natural reaction to that, I think most people will go, what the fuck's that lens? Which is, you know, a natural response to seeing something unnatural. And those kind of examples are everywhere. And I don't tend to see as much HDR photography now. It seems to have had its day and not be so popular anymore. But it's still, here's when I did, whilst I was in Liverpool as well, of the Trent Alexander-Arnold mural. Took a wide shot. There's always a bloody car in it. But again, I overprocessed all this because it was a real dull day. It was difficult to see anything, and I've never shown anybody this. It's just sat on my hard drive. But you can tell, can't you? There's from a HDR again. What I was saying about the line around the building from the overprocessing, and again, if you look at that building, you can see the backlight coming, radiating from it, which it shouldn't do if it was edited properly. And that sky's blown out to whole hell there because of the blowout. And again, if you look at that from a human perspective, walking up down that street, that just looks completely unnatural, because it is unnatural. And photography should not be unnatural. It should be subtle. Even if you're showing great detail, it should still look natural enough to the human eye for a human to go, oh God, that's brilliant. But some people look at that and they go, oh, it's brilliant, because they don't know any different. They can't tell any different. Probably the non-player characters amongst us would react like that. But again, if you look at the tree, I can't look at this anymore. It's just awful. It's just over-processed, over-edited, over-egged dog shit. But some people will love it. I'm just glad that there doesn't seem to be so much of it around now, certainly in professional photography circles. A more subtle use of editing would be like this one here, which I took at a local wind farm maybe 9 or 10 years ago. So just full screen that, and again you can see on this one that's more subtle how it is. You do see red sunsets like that. You do see highlights in the clouds and the planes going past. I could just see the blades on the wind farm, as awful as they are. So that's, you know, kind of on the edge of the Uncanny Valley. If we put it in, oh, it's already in Photoshop. If we put it in Photoshop and just look at, let's have a go at, we'll raw filter it, even though it's a JPEG, we'll just raw filter it and see what it does. And again, look, if we start to overprocess things, if we just bring the brightness up a bit too much, shadows down a bit, can you see how the colours are all starting to go now? And we're starting to get that edge that I talked about, that awful edge along things, which the human eye goes, oh, that doesn't look natural. Pump the whites up. Again, you've never seen a sky quite that colour, I think. Pink, red, orange, green, yellow, all in one mix. But some people, heavy contrast. Some people would do that because to them that's the future, that's beautiful, that's what they want their pictures to look like. They've got to look like that. When in reality, those of us with a common sense approach to photography and viewing things and wanting natural looking things, that now looks like dog shit. And if we do a before and after, you can see the difference. And how subtle, natural, as you saw it, but how you saw it. As you know, my work always adds a bit of contrast in it because I see in contrast. But on the right hand side, just looking at the propeller blades, look at that awful line around them, and that how it kind of spreads out from the blades. Where on here, it's nice and subtle and doesn't. So, Uncanny Valley everywhere. The human eye seeing things naturally that don't resonate, that make you think, oh my God, that's just wrong. And have a look around for some HDR images. I'm not going to show you any. I've seen very few that I would class as being natural. They're all very obvious. Even the good ones are very obvious. But I'm going to link the next bit now. We'll look at a few. We'll look at a few model edits, and we'll look at how filtering people's faces, models and actresses particularly, can make you go, that's been photoshopped to death. So we'll have a look at that. So when you're looking at people's faces, I say this when I'm photographing particularly female models and actors of a certain vintage, because they're often a bit worried that you're going to make them look older or less well than they actually are, because digital camera sensors now are that big and horrible. They don't miss anything, they'll show everything. But when you're looking at a human, when you're interacting with a human, and this is one of the ways where portrait photographers are really great in fact, is when you look at a person, you don't stare at them and go, oh my God, look at that bit of skin that's rough, look at that spot on her nose, oh my God, her eyelashes are all up. You don't do that. You look at people, and even if you're having an intense conversation with people, because you're listening and you're breathing, you're smelling the air, you're looking around, you're not looking at them in that depth, unless, all right, I'll admit, sometimes somebody comes in with a big water on their face, it's difficult to not look. I get that. But generally speaking, when you're talking to people, you don't stare at them. Where a camera does stare. A camera stares longingly at a person when you're taking a picture. And it gathers every bit of that information that your brain doesn't normally clock. So and I probably was guilty of this initially in my early career, there's a tendency to want to over-exaggerate beauty, or turn what's natural beauty into unnatural beauty, because you think somebody doesn't want to look a certain way, or you think they look better if you don't show that spot, blemish, crease. So until I learnt my process and my real editing skill, I used to overdo things a little bit. And I've actually been back and re-edited some of my really early stuff since I started this podcast, because I wanted it to look more like what I do now. And I certainly was doing quite a bit of heavy over editing early days. And I kind of knew that, but I didn't know any better. So I went with it. But from an Uncanny Valley perspective, when I look at those initial edits now, and I look at a lot of work across the photography spectrum, there's a lot of Uncanny Valley happening in portrait and fashion photography. Advertising photography is probably one of the worst culprits, although they have dialed it back a little bit in recent years. But when you're looking at beauty shots, hair and beauty, makeup, perfume, those kind of shots, look for the Uncanny Valley. It's quite obvious once you see it. And you used to have a running joke, maybe she's born with it, maybe it's Photoshop. And more often than not it is. So I'll show you an example of one of my bits of work here, where it would be dead easy to Uncanny Valley a person, even if it's unintentional. If I can find the raw files, he says. This one, a raw file. Yeah, so we'll look at this picture of the lovely Evie. And I'll go through our edit process. I'll show you the edit process, and we'll over edit to make it uncanny. So you can see straight off the camera that's our shot. Bear in mind, I don't use light meters. I don't go to all that trouble. I instinctively know if I shoot at f11, 125th of a second, ISO 100, white balance set to match my Bowens light switches around daylight, and I have my lamp, my key light about 4 foot away from the subject, I know I'm going to get roughly what I want at f11. Still see guys to this day trying to perfect it, running backwards and forwards with their light meter, wasting time when you've got masses of control in the raw file to get it with experience close enough. If you've been doing photography for 10 years and you're still using a light meter in a studio, pack it in, go and get another job. So there's Evie, one key light. You can see if you look into her eyes where the key light was, roughly up and above it, nice big square soft box coming down onto her face. Nice and simple, like most of my portraits are. Got a little bit of vignetting from where the lights fell off behind her onto the whiteboard. Quite a natural headshot. Makeup artist had, giving her quite a natural look. And Evie's got a very beautiful face and a very good complexion. But even, like I said, when you look up close, there's a few little areas which you might want to fix if you were being particular, or if the beauty editor said I want flawless. And what we were doing here, we built up to quite heavy makeup, so I'll show you some other examples in a bit, but she's got a little bit of green flashes around it just to add a little bit of pinch into the mix. But we ended up quite heavy makeup, purples and stuff. But just for the first bit, we went with quite natural, one lamp, beautiful face, staring away from camera, looking quite imaginative. Nice soft skin, soft box, because a soft box will create soft tones. If you want a harsh skin tone and harsh shadows, you take the soft box off, you use either a reflector or just an open lamp and ping at them. I love the soft box. I don't like beauty dishes. Beauty dishes are a pain in the arse. They're too harsh. Even with a filter on, they're still harsh. Give me a soft box any day. beauty dishes do create some nice key lights in their eyes, but just too much. So give me a softbox. So as always in my processes, if you've seen any of my videos before, great. If not, watch this one, and this you'll see my processes quite clearly. So I'm always checking for exposure, and I'm quite good. I'm going to rely on my histogram up here, which is telling me that I'm got loads of shadow in here. That's where all the hair is, most likely. Up here we've got a bit of exposure we can use here, just that little percentage of exposure. From a colour perspective, any colour that's hanging about on the right hand side of that peak shadow there up at the top, anything that's over here is going to be additional to what we want. So we've got a little bit of blue in there. So what I normally do is I would use the temperature tint features here to get rid of that. Sometimes when you change from a shot to auto, it picks it up for you, and it's almost got it perfect there. We've just got a little line of red and yellow in there, which I think is the highlights in her lips and her skin, and it's not, there's nothing in the background, there's no discolour in the background. I can see that, even on an uncalibrated screen you can see that. If you've got a missed colour in the background, you'll see it like that. That's an over-egged example, but that's kind of what happens, but there's none of that going on. So I'm going to rely on auto. The only other things I'm looking at from an exposure point of view is, have I blown the highlights? Well, I can tell on the histogram up here I haven't, because there's no, that information there'd be right over on the right hand side if I had. Like that. Right, and I haven't, so I can put that back. If I had, you can reduce it by bringing the highlights off, like that. But again, you can start straying into Uncanny Valley territory if you do that. So I'm going to leave that as 0. Shadows. Don't want the hair like that. No, I shot it so we had a shadow. Don't want more shadow. Again, we're in Uncanny Valley territory already. So I'm going to leave that as 0. And I'm happy with that exposure, because my experience told me to shoot at ISO 100, f11, 1/25th of a second with daylight, white balance, and that's how close I got it, without running backwards and forwards with a light meter, without spending 10 minutes getting a grey card and doing a colour balance. I'm happy to go. So I'm just going to open that up now, so it makes me a JPEG. And now we can start to retouch. Now, if you remember, I've told you before in other videos, but if this is your first time seeing it, sometimes when you compress from RAW to JPEG, in that compression we lose colours, and we get colours added in. Now you can see in the histogram here, look, I've picked up a load of green and yellow, and what's happened is how the algorithm cuts out information to process from a RAW to a JPEG. Sometimes you get that happens, you pick up colours that you didn't have initially. I'm not too worried about anything on the left hand side there. That tends to be image detail, shadow detail, and that is going to be that ear hole there, that colour. So I'm not worried about that. It's anything on the right hand side here. So to fix that at the JPEG stage, I'm going to use photo filters, and all you do is you put in the opposite colour to what you've gained. So if I just put this over here, look, if I go down, what's the opposite of yellow and green? Violet. Think of a colour wheel, look at the colour, pick the opposite, and add in a little certain percentage. Use the arrow up key. You can see that, look. I've just made a little bit of, I've got rid of the yellow, but I've added a little bit of magenta. So to get rid of the magenta, I'm going to go to another photo filter. I'm going to put the opposite in, which is green. And I'm just going to, I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to go 1%. So you can see, just by doing that, I've got rid of that. And that colour that's left is likely to be the little bits of highlighted red, which are on her face. You can just subtly see that if you look at the background on the pictures. I switched them on and off. You can see the background white changing shade slightly. So I'm confident now that I've got rid of that in the colour I didn't want. The only thing I've noticed now is I think we can add a little bit more exposure, because I didn't do it at the last stage, because I wanted to see what control I got here, and we can feather it a little bit more, and we can decide better here whether if we alter the exposure at the raw stage, we're stuck with it. If we do it here, just tweaking, fine tuning highlights and shadows, we can feather it a bit more here, a bit more control. So if I click in there, if I've just opened up levels, by the way, if I click in the levels on the right hand side, hold my shift key and arrow down, and I come across there, it's just a bit too far, so I let go of the shift key, just use the arrow up and go back. You can now see my histograms move with it. We're now pinched at either end. If I switch that on and off, look, can you see that contrast change? That's what I do on every edit. We check colour. Once we convert from RAW to JPEG, we check colour. We fix that. We're then going to micro adjust the exposure using levels. We've done that, we're happy. I'm now going to start the retouch. So we can't retouch skin and eyes and all that stuff on these adjustment layers. So I want them to be there, but I want them out of the way. So I'm just going to press Control, Shift and E on the keyboard. And it's going to flatten them down into the base layer, and they're still there. But we can now make a retouch using the background layer as a template. So to make sure we do non-destructive editing, we always use layers, hence why I did the last bit on layers. And first thing we do is make a copy of the background layer. So we're going to press Command and J on the keyboard. That will give us a copy of that layer. And the reason we do that is because anything we do on here doesn't affect the layer underneath it. So if we completely mess this up, we can delete that layer, start again. If we do all the edit on that bottom layer, we make a mistake. We've got to edit, undo everything, or start again. So we always make sure we make an extra layer, like so. So the first thing I would do with Eevee is I would just go, all right, a couple of little blemishes, but nothing to write home about, are they? If we use the patch tool, we can probably just get rid of them pretty easily, like that. Again, not doing too much because Eve's got beautiful skin anyway, and these are just micro things. We could try doing that, I guess, for that bit. It's probably a bit more brutal than I would have liked. Sometimes if you're not careful, you can end up making more work than you started with. Just looking around for really obvious things that people will stare at, even that little freckle. I did speak to Evie prior to this and asked her about the edit, and she said, do what you need to do to make me look great, Lance. So we've done that. So there's not that much there that's like really standing out, popping out to me. So that's kind of my first edit, blemish removal, using sometimes a combination of healing tools, patch tools, and sometimes clone stamping, but not very often unless it's a really bad skin retouch. We could probably go down to her neck and her chest as well and just take off the freckles that are obvious, because they can be a bit annoying when you see them and you can't unsee them. So that's that. So now I want to copy that layer because I want to do some more retouch, but I don't want to lose what I've done. So to make sure I don't do that, I just press Command and copy again. So I've got a third layer there. You can retouch these. You can double click in there. We'll call that spots. We can click in here and call this one blur, because I'm going to add some blur to this to make her skin look flawless, and I'll show you what we do. So her skin's pretty flawless anyway, but in this layer here we're going to use a Gaussian blur. So we go up to filter, blur, it says select Gaussian blur, and if you just watch Evie's face in the background, hopefully it'll show you this. We'll zoom in a little bit like to get a preview. 1% is not much. Let's put 200% in, see what happens. Oh my god, she's disappeared. Let's go with 15%. So 15% is what I use, and I'll tell you why I use that much. It looks really fake, too much, but the good thing about that is you can reduce it. If you don't put enough on, you've got to do it again. So I put too much on in the first instance, and then I feather it off to make sure I've got what I want. It gives you control, gives you choices, and that's what you want. So this might depend on the size of your JPEG you're working with. If you're using a low-end camera where the picture's not as big, 10% or 5% might be enough for you. 5 pixels, sorry. Higher-end cameras where you've got pictures that are like 24 meg upwards, you're going to need a bit more. So you can work that out yourselves, but you can kind of see how plastic I've made it look, but I'm going to take much of that off. So goes in blur, click OK. That's now on that layer. You can see, look, it's just on that layer. And you can see her skin is flawless now. Beautiful flawless skin. But do we want that? Well, clearly we don't. We don't. So what I'm going to do is on the opacity for that layer, I'm just going to change the opacity on that layer to 40%. Now you can see that it's reduced it a hell of a lot. But obviously our eyes, the nose, the mouth, everything's still blurred because the effect is added to all that. I've made the opacity lower by pressing V on my keyboard and just selecting number 4. And if I press V, so you've got that tool selected, the pointer tool, you can select 9 and it'll give you 90%. So that's how I do that. Or you can click into that drop down and move it around. Find it more precise just to go V on your keyboard, select the number you want, gives you 40%. So now I'm going to put a mask on this layer, and the mask will allow us to brush out the bits where we don't want the blur. So we do that by putting a layer mask on. Can you see this little camera looking thing here? If you click in there, it puts a little white masking, and what that's going to allow us to do is using black and white color palette and paintbrush tool, which is B on your keyboard. See, it's selected my paintbrush tool, to rub in or rub back out, rub on, rub off any effect we don't want. So on the paintbrush tool B, if we use the bracket up and down key on the keyboard, can you see me making the brush bigger and smaller? And if we drop up here and make sure the hardness is completely off, that'll make sure that we'll get a feathered edge on the brush. No lines, we'll get an edge, nice feathered edge. And I'll show you. If we watch paintbrush B, my paintbrush is set to 100% opacity. That means it's going to take everything off wherever I brush. So if I make it slightly smaller than what I need and just brush, can you see that now that's coming clear again? Yeah, like that. Wherever I don't want the blur, where there's areas of natural detail, eyes, eyebrows, etc., I'm going to brush the effect off using a black palette on paintbrush B. If I make a mistake, it's difficult to see where I've been, isn't it? It's difficult to see there. Little trick, if you press backslash on your keyboard, you'll highlight where you've been. So you can go back, you can leave it on, it'll highlight as you brush, so you can see where you've been. And I'm doing this quite roughly. I'm not doing this as kind of fine as I would do if I was doing it for real. For the purpose of this demo, I'm doing it quite roughly, but you can see where I've been now. And then you can switch it off by pressing backslash again, just to see how it looks. Yeah, remember I'm on 100% opacity. So I'm going to do that for her eyes, her eyebrows, a nose, a mouth, and where there are any creases or contrasty bits on her face. For example, I don't want the line down her nose to be soft. So using the paintbrush tool and dropping the opacity there to 50%, I'm going to draw a line down her nose, but you'll see how the line's fainter. That just means it's not as brutal, it's not taking as much off, it's got a little bit of feathering there. So if you do it at 50% or any dropped opacity, the more you brush over it, look, it adds it on. So you can start off with 50 and build it up if you like. I find sometimes if you go right over the edge at 100%, it's a bit harsh, it's a bit obvious. So I tend to do the edges of things at 50% and then build up the brush inside the edges. You can see I've changed it to 100% now. To just do like that. Okay, so remember, the point of this video is Uncanny Valley. We're trying to make things look realistic. So if I press that, you can see where I've brushed. I'm going to do the next bit really quick so it doesn't take me all day to do it. I'm just going to brush down all the way around the edges at 50% opacity. And I'm just going onto the skin. If you notice, it's just bleeding onto the skin, so I don't get a big harsh line. And then I'm just going to go a bit further out at 100% to get rid of the blur that you can often see when you're doing this. And again, I'm just going to give her a 50% chin line like that. So we've now done all the bits that we don't want. You can spend as much or little time on that as you want. If we switch on the eyeball on and off now, look, can you see that subtle skin? It's quite subtle, isn't it? You look at the creases under her eyes, it disappears. The little kind of like real small blemishes in her skin have kind of gone. And that's not bad. That's not bad at all. So we started off with a 15 pixel Gaussian blur. We reduced the opacity on that down to 40%. We then put a mask in so we could brush out using the paintbrush tool the areas we want to be sharp in focus and not affected by the effect. You can see if you look around the face, I've missed a little bit where I've brushed because I've been doing this quick and I've not been zooming in, but you can quickly look if I put the brush back in and just go around just to make sure. I've gone a bit too far there, but for this demo it doesn't matter. You can see, look, just do that all around just to make sure you've got everything. The key thing to remember to do as you're going along is press save, because you'll forget. If you press save it as a PSD file as you're going along. You'll keep all your layers, you won't lose anything. You'll have a nice copy of it. So that's pretty much it. What I'm doing, I'm not going to do any more than that. That's my skin edit redone. Now if the client comes back and says, look Lance, there's some highlights here that's quite shiny, I'd like you to get rid of all the shine, we can do that. But from an Uncanny Valley perspective, we zoom straight into those areas, and I'll show you how, because that's quite a light retouch in the grand scheme of things. And if we heavily retouch it by just simply putting, let's say we go for 80% opacity, can you see now how we're starting to stray into fake territory? If I put that up to 100%, excuse me, what I'll do is I'm going to make two of these. I'm going to copy that, and on the bottom one we're going to go for 40%, and the top one there is going to be 100%. So that's it at 100%. That's it how we did it at 40, 100, 40. And you can see how that, I think, still looks quite natural, but some people will go with that, and I think that's when we're getting into Uncanny Valley territory. That's no longer looking human. Evie's starting to look like a bit of a fake, and even if we brush out the bits that are obvious where it's clipping, like around the nose like that, in fact you can even see, look at that terrible shadow where it's over marking. But you'll see this if you look at some retouch, you look at some heavy retouch, you'll see this level of skin distortion, and they're the territories you don't want to go in, because now the whole picture's starting to look dicey, like really dicey. And humans looking at humans, or humans looking at other things that are supposed to be human, robots for example, once they get to start to look too human, that's when Uncanny Valley kicks in. But from a photography standpoint, the Uncanny Valley for us is probably the opposite. They stop looking human, they start looking not human, and that's when we clock and go Photoshop. And the difference between these two quick examples I've shown you here is subtle, horrendous. And if you can just remember to be subtle in your edit, try and keep it. Remember I said before about when you're speaking to somebody and you're just talking to them, you're not staring at them. Try and keep it, make it look like it would do if you were just talking to them, not staring at them, and you won't go too far wrong. And just don't over edit. And a good rule of thumb is to edit it, leave it for a few hours or even a day if you can. Come back at it and look at it with fresh eyes, because your fresh eyes will make you go, holy shit, I've overcooked that. And fresh eyes are everything for photographers. So that's pretty much all I would do from a retouch perspective, unless the client said, can you get rid of all those highlights? And now I'll go through that on another video, but you can soon become very uncanny. And what I wanted to do today was just make you aware of how easy it is to come into the Uncanny Valley arena, and try and steer you away from that. I'm just going to do a real quick, just made them into one layer. I'm just going to do a real quick kind of tutorial, if you like, on what might happen from here. So a client might go, can you get rid of all those highlights? So yeah, we can get rid of all the highlights. You know, we can make them all go away. If that's what you want, client, we can pretty quickly, you know, get rid of any hint of humanity from the lovely Evie's face. overcook that a little bit, but it won't matter, will it? Because client doesn't care anyway. Like so, and just make sure that she, yeah, that's it. Oh, we're happy. Oh yeah, you've given a real defined jawline there, Lance. Let's have a bit more of that. Let's do a little bit more. Let's have a bit more definition on that jawline. Oh yeah, that's brilliant. A little bit more highlight on her face, just up there. Just bring a high. Oh my God, yeah, that's it. Yes, I'm exaggerating, but I've had this before from clients, and can you see that? This is what happens when people start to overcook edits and uncanniness starts to kick in, and then they might add that again, and they might say, well, can you brighten the picture because when it needs to be brighter. Oh yeah, that's great. Look at that. Oh, it looks like she's in a beam of light. We love that. I'm exaggerating, but this is what happens. And again, we've gone from that real nice, subtle, natural finish to, oh, jumps off the page. On a thumbnail, it might look great. You might like YouTube thumbnail or Instagram thumbnail. Oh, that's great. You click on it, and suddenly you go, holy shit, is there a human under there? That skin can't be that flawless. Has that been edited? Look at that bit there. Is it? And of course, I'm over-exaggerating all this, but that's what happens in photography, particularly in fashion, beauty, and those areas. So just be careful that you don't get sucked into doing that for yourself, thinking it's good, or doing it for somebody else because they've asked. Make sure that you're keenly aware of Uncanny Valley tripping you up and making you look like a rank amateur, because you're not, are you? You know more. You know better than that. You definitely know better than that. So we'll just finish up this picture, the lovely Evie, and what I would do from now is I would normally just add a bit more contrast, because as you know I like contrast. Let me just get rid of those god awful layers. So let's just pretend that's what I'm happy with. What I want to do is just explain to you why curves are important. We did all this work so far in not destroying our colour and our exposure, and I did it in purposeful steps in the raw file and the JPEG. What a lot of people do now is they'll open up curves because they want to add a bit more spice, shall we say, to the picture. They want a bit more oomph, or they just want to brighten it or whatever, and they open up the curves. And when you get Photoshop out of the crate, it comes with your curves set to light like that. And what people do, because they've heard this phrase and it's been around for years, is they go, do an S curve, do an S curve. Look, you pull it down like that to your contrast, and you can pull it up there for highlights. Yeah. But again, we've very quickly gone straight back into Uncanny Valley territory, because all we've done is completely burn out Evie's face. Now, that might be slightly over exaggeration, but let's just do it even less. Let's just pull it down a little bit there and just tweak the highlights there. It's only a little bit, few percentage. But again, we've burnt the skin and we've turned those lovely natural highlights, skin tones, yellow and orange. We've gone into Uncanny Valley territory straight away just by doing that. And I see so much of that, and I see so much decent retouch until that point, and it frustrates the goddamn life out of me. So I'm going to show you how I do it the right way. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to control your curves properly and make a proper curves contrast exposure change, giving you ultimate control and making sure you don't ruin what you've already done. The first thing we need to do is we need to load in the luminosity. Now the luminosity is the bones of the picture, if you like. We're going to load the luminosity and say, keep us just there. Don't stray higher, don't stray lower, don't go left, don't go right, just alter these bits. And we do that by using the channels layer, holding down the control or command if you're on a Mac, and you see how the highlight on the little finger comes up. Click in RGB, look, you'll see it's now loaded in the luminosity. So when we make an adjustment with curves, it's firstly only going to do the highlights, and secondary only going to do the shadows. Two individual layers which allow us to fine tune and manipulate those areas. The first thing you have to do when you click on curves is go into the little circle there, click on the curves layer, is go into your curves and change what you will have had preset as light to pigment ink. That's important. It has to be pigment ink. Click OK. Now what we're going to do is we're going to click bang in the center of the curves there. If you don't get bang in the center, don't worry, because you can click into input and output and just change it by arrow up or arrow down key. And the only value we're interested in here is the output. and we can go down probably about 40% before we start getting into Uncanny Valley territory. For my edits, I normally do 15, 20, 25 max because I'm just looking to pinch top end stuff. But we'll see on this one, and we'll visually gauge it to see. Bearing in mind, looking at your histogram to make sure you don't stray into masses of territory up here and overexpose. So if I hold my shift key down, click in output, and then arrow down 10%, you see that? 20%, a little bit too much for me, that. Gonna go 10%, then I'm just gonna go another 5. So from 50 down to 35, 15%. And you'll see if I switch that on and off, it's only affected the highlights. Little bit of the midtones, but mainly highlights, yeah? So now I'm going to make a copy of that and invert it so I can just do the shadows. To do that, we press Command and J to copy the layer, Command and I to invert the layer. You can see on there we've now got a negative invert. Double click on that to open it up, and this time we're going to click in output and go the other way. We're going to go back to 50 and start from 50. This time we're just adjusting shadows, and we only want a little bit. Now, more often than not, I only use 5% shadows. You can tell if we look at the shadows on here that we're almost there, we're almost shadowed it out, but we can get a little more in there. So I'm just going to use the arrow up key in output to go 5%. You'll saw that shift on the screen. If I then shift that on and off, look, you can see we just got a little bit more pinch. So if I turn those both off, that's the picture as it was. Quite nice, quite like that. If I turn those both back on, just lifted it just that little bit, and that's now more where I would want it to be. And the only way you can do that and have that much control is by using your curves, your luminosity through your RGB channel, and fine-tuning in small percentages. If I want to fine-tune this more, I can click on that and click in there again and go back either way a few percent. Or if I don't want to do that, I can just click on the opacity for each layer and pull that off and reduce that like that. Either way, you've got masses and masses and masses of control. You're not wanging sliders around, you're not trying to guess S-curves, you're not doing any of that bullshit. And the more important than that, we haven't affected the colour that we spent that bit of time earlier on fixing. So we've got great colour, great contrast, great exposure, great skin tones through a quick retouch, and we've not strayed into Uncanny Valley. Evie looks very natural still, beautiful as she was when we started, minimal work, but a great finish. And that's the process I use for 90% of my pictures. If we get to the point where the client wants ridiculous enough, I'll try and talk them out of it, or maybe do it in the pro test. But there are other things you can do to get into uncanniness, and we don't want to do that, do we? Because as I said at the start of this video, Uncanny Valley for photographers is not the place to go. We need to be as far away from that as we can. If it starts to look not human, or starts to look not natural within what we expect to see within our reality, dial it back and dial it way back. Less is more, 100% in this instance. So, excuse me, I hope you've enjoyed that. That was the Uncanny Valley, which is not really Uncanny Valley. I just think it's a great title for a video, Uncanny Valley. Thanks to AJ and Ecclefisher at the Wi-Files for the inspiration for that title, for pushing me down this path today. I've enjoyed talking to you about what it is, why it is, how it's easily stepped on, and how to avoid it and why. If it resonated with you, great. Drop your comments below or ping me an email. Always happy to pick those up. Do me a favour, like and subscribe and share with your mates. I'd like to grow the channel now, like us to get a bit more action, a few more views. You can help me as well if you want to go and buy a t-shirt. I got a new one through today. Didn't iron it very well, did I? New t-shirt through today. You can buy the mugs and everything on my website, lanceburkitt.com/shop. Every little helps. I want to keep the channel going. I want to grow it. I want it to become something a bit better. If you've got any topics or things you'd like to talk about or like me to discuss, ping me a message. I'll have a look at it when I get time. As you know, I'm always time short, so one a week, one every 2 weeks is probably the most, with a couple of shorts in between. But I will do as much as I can when I can. So again, thanks for listening. Hope you stayed till the end. If you did, come back next time, and I'll see you on the flip side. All right, guys, have a great evening. Cheers.
Think about a way to get you out my mind. Think about a way to get you out my mind. Think about a way to get you out my mind.